We're on the home stretch of Talkin Trek with Lee Sargent. The man behind Star Trek Scribbles is back for our next 3 episodes to talk all things movies. Today we're kicking it off with the original 6.
Now, in its 7th year of podcasting, Trekzone presents a Trekzone conversation with your host, Matt Miller.
Well, he's back with me. We finally managed to make some time to talk Trek. Lee, we're busy people.
It is the busy season.
Did I actually introduce you? I don't think I did. It is, of course, Mr. Lee Sargent, the awesome guy behind Star Trek Scribbles and Talkin Trek. The thing we do here.
That's it.
Lee, how is your Christmas shopping going?
I do lean very heavily on my wife because she is an excellent gift purchaser, and I am a frantic gift purchaser. So this year as I say, every year I kind of lean on her. The bad thing about that is that she gets stuck with me buying a gift for her. So actually, I'm worse at wrapping. I'm not sure how wrapping is the bane of my existence.
Yes, mine too.
Both musically and also gift wrapping. It just looks like it's always like I give gifts and people go, "Oh, that's nice. You got like a 4-year-old to wrap it," and I'm like,
Blame the cat, maybe.
Yeah, that's it.
Well, hey, we are going to be talking movies over the next 3 episodes, and of course, people can find you at Twitter at Lee Sargent.
That's right.
And Lee draws stuff on Facebook as well, and I'm there on Twitter at MirrorMatt86. But today, let's talk original series movies. The first 6. We had a couple of interesting ones and a couple of doozies. What are your thoughts overall?
Yeah, like I don't actually give a lot of credit to the whole kind of the odds and evens story. That I think because the whole thing was that the odd films were the bad films and the even films were the good films, and it all kind of falls down a little bit for me because Star Trek 3 I consider to be one of the better ones, and also I like Star Trek 5 despite all of its flaws. I think that there's a lot of heart in that film, so I don't subscribe to that. But overall, I mean, this is what a wonderful period of Star Trek. We have this amazing trilogy that takes place, which if it was happening today, it would be a lot more pronounced. But it's almost you get to the end of Star Trek, Star Trek 4, I guess, and you go, well, oh wow, I've just been watching a whole trilogy of a story that's played right out over 3 films. And that's all really, really cool. So yeah, and then of course Star Trek 6. I really love Star Trek 6. I'm not sure if we lump Generations in with the next batch or whether or not that's considered to be an original. But yeah, it's like overall. I mean, I don't. It's funny when people kind of talk about what's your favorite and what's your least favorite, and it's like least favorite. It's really not that bad of an award when it comes to these films.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, I think one of the biggest guest stars that they had in these original series movies, and we can sort of touch on Generations because it obviously starts in that timeline. But I was getting to, the biggest guest star has to be Ricardo Montalban's chest.
I certainly it was a sight to behold. It's it's such a but it's such an interesting thing to have. Like Ricardo Montalban was, of course, famous outside of Star Trek, Fantasy Island. He was massive for that, and it was just this kind of. He's just this force of nature on screen, and he's got this giant bare chest that these are his pecs. There's no prosthetics there or anything. This is pure Montalban, and it's very he just completely just gives everything to that role.
I wonder whether people were getting confused in the cinema. Just by the sheer size of these pecs. We shouldn't focus too much on them.
It's a question raised. That's the thing, and so they did answer it, and they confirmed that it was indeed just it's all him. There's another actor who he was in the original Tick series and also as Batman and he was also in Dark Knight. He has quite heavy lines on his eyes, and everyone always questions whether or not he's wearing eyeliner. And he's like, no, it's this is completely natural. This is what my eyes look like. So I imagine it was like that for Ricardo. He's like, no, this is all me. Do you want to do some push-ups? Because I'll show you.
I just think it's brilliant that the costume designer has come along, just seen who they're working with, and just gone, you know what? I ain't covering that at all.
What I think is interesting about the costume too is that it's an interesting mix mash of, it's supposed to be the remnants of Starfleet uniforms and stuff like that, and it's interesting kind of what the mix of it is. Like the medallion he wears on his chest is supposed to be the Starfleet Delta, and it is, but it's not from original Star Trek. Like, they didn't have the metal badges. It's a completely kind of new made up thing, and I think there was like scraps of material and stuff which almost resemble the maroon jackets, but he obviously wouldn't have had access to them in the day.
The question was also raised too about Chekhov, who wasn't in that episode in Space Seed of the original series.
Yeah. He wasn't on screen in that episode.
Well, this is the interesting thing, because he wasn't actually introduced in the second season as a new person on the ship, as a new officer on the ship. Yeah. One could create some headcanon if you're going down that path and saying, well, he was in the lower decks and they would have passed each other.
Yeah.
Maybe he was on security.
Well, no, you could easily have him bringing dinner, someone had to show him how to use some of the devices, stuff like that. Easily could have been the ensign who was assigned to do that stuff.
Absolutely.
I don't think it's a huge, like, it's certainly not a deal breaker, and it's certainly not like everyone loves to jump on it and go, oh, and it's like, yeah, but it's of all the things to explain off, it's pretty bloody easy to explain.
Exactly. Well, let's not dwell too much on the Wrath of Khan, because there are six and a half movies in this series.
And controversially, I'll say Wrath of Khan isn't necessarily my favourite.
Oh, okay.
Like, everyone feels like they go to Wrath of Khan as their favourite, and I'm like, it's such an easy one. And for a long time, Star Trek 6 was my favourite. But I think I have the confidence in my choice now to say Star Trek 3 is actually my favourite.
Okay, well, The Search for Spock, certainly an interesting one, and
the visuals are amazing in Search for Spock.
Absolutely,
the wounded Enterprise coming back into space dock. The soundtrack in Search for Spock is just unbelievably good. The music that actually accompanies the Enterprise returning to space dock is so exceptional. And then we have this amazing scene in Star Trek 3 where the Enterprise is kind of gliding into view, and there's a bunch of officers sitting around space dock and they all stop and stare, and we get a great look of Janice Rand, who of course appeared in the original series, and we get to see, she does this amazing shake of the head. And I always, when I was a kid, I never really understood the significance of that. I always kind of saw that I didn't realize it was her first thing, because her hair is completely different, and I always saw that as someone kind of shaking their head at the recklessness of James T. Kirk, and not realizing that it was actually her heart broken over the Enterprise being damaged like that. Like watching the wounded Enterprise come in and knowing that Spock had been killed and stuff like that. I think that was it's an exceptionally good scene. And then I think William Shatner gets to really shine in this entire film, directed by, of course, his good friend Leonard Nimoy. Things like, when the ensign asks whether or not, or the cadet asks whether or not there'll be a service or a celebration, a hero's welcome. Wonderful sequence. And of course, then when his son is killed by Commander Kruge, who is an amazing Klingon. Christopher Lloyd really doesn't get enough credit for really shaping Klingons in that performance, because he does an amazing job. Kirk falling down on the bridge is just exceptional. It's full of such exceptional scenes, and I think I think that's a shame that it gets lumped in with kind of this whole bullshit about. Oh, sorry, I realize that I've got to scale back with those, the swears. It falls under this ridiculousness of this kind of, it's an odd film, it's an odd numbered film, so it's not as good. And it's like, but
go for
the
it.
Sequences, if you're a Star Trek fan, if you're looking for core Star Trek stuff, Star Trek 3 delivers massively. The destruction of the Enterprise is again an extraordinary sequence where the performance by Walter Koenig and James Doohan during the activation of the destruct code is unbelievably good. Again, it's a very nuanced performance of both Chekhov and Scotty's face as they realize what Kirk's doing, and almost the reluctance to give those orders. There's a hesitation on Chekhov before he does his, and there's the grim determination that Scotty when he's giving it, and it's just, you know, they're signing the death warrant of the Enterprise. I think if you dismiss Star Trek 3 as a powerhouse of a Star Trek film, you are you're missing out on a lot of really, really solid stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to a certain degree as well, Star Trek 5, The Final Frontier.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it is this sort of film of where are they taking it? What message is Shatner
there's
trying to
garbage.
say?
There's definitely garbage in the film, and you can't kind of and you know, and it is what it is, because Shatner kind of explained. You know, one of the highlights for me of my life was getting to talk to William Shatner about Star Trek 5, and I always knew that if I ever met him, I would ask him about Star Trek 5, because I find it such an interesting conundrum, because there are definitely problems in that film. There's look and feel problems. So some of the design work in it is, and some of the like Spock. I don't feel his makeup or his hair is particularly great in that film. I don't know if it's the same person or they're going for a different look, but it's just, it really is not as good as it is in other films. And of course, some of the production design stuff is just, obviously the how many floors of the Enterprise are there and stuff. And it's, those jet boots are a really novel idea, but they just don't quite work in that turbo shaft. But the thing was that as Shatner kind of said, he said the lesson that he got from Star Trek 5 was to not compromise on the vision. And he said, you know, he was a first-time director of a big film. He listened too much to the studio and didn't know that he could push back, and didn't realize what he could demand and get away with, because he was just happy to be there. So you've got whole sections of missed opportunities, but then you've got these whole sections of extraordinary scenes. Kirk and Spock and McCoy facing their pain is amazing character building. Like the story of McCoy kind of having to euthanize his father as a doctor, and then realize, you know, and then facing the pain that, you know, there was a cure. That's a very real, dramatic kind of moment for DeForest Kelley, and that's wonderful to see. And of course, we know Spock's pain. We know that but to see it kind of laid out in front of us. And what I love the most is the way Shatner kind of just pushes back on that, and how he refuses, because they're giving up their pain, and he refuses to give his pain up, because it's what defines him. And when we're talking about his pain, we're talking about David, we're talking about the loss of the Enterprise, we're talking about the death of Spock. These are the things that Cyborg's offering to take away, and of course he doesn't want to lose those things. They're too important to him. And I think that makes the whole film. It makes the whole film worthwhile. You can sit through everything else just to see some of those sequences, and then, of course, see Kirk put God in his place. It doesn't get better than that.
And create one of the longest-lasting memes, I think,
exactly.
in the franchise.
I don't think it gets any better than that. I don't know if there's a better Kirk scene than... I have a question. It's just, you know, it's this wonderful scene, which is just purely by accident, I'm sure, but it is almost the culmination of Captain Kirk.
And of course, we did skip over probably the best Star Trek movie, The Voyage Home. Let's give it a bit of credit here to just
definitely
not take anything seriously and head back to the present day and save a couple of whales.
Well, the thing was about Star Trek 4 is this is one of the first mega environmental films. And I think a lot of people don't realize that this was a film that was bringing an environmental message into mainstream consciousness at a time when that was not the thing. That wasn't a thing. I mean, certainly there were films like Silent Running back in the 70s that talked about the forest and stuff like that. But I think this was a real examination of our direct impact on the Earth and how it may have ramifications in the future. And I think when you kind of look at Star Trek 4 as this kind of normalization of environmental issues, of people being concerned about environmental issues and realizing that there is an endpoint to this, that if we wipe everything, we wipe out a species, what impact does that have? In a more realistic manner, what impact does that have on our ecosystem, the food chain, etc.? Here it is presenting that, look, through our own short-sightedness, this is a mirror of the societies. Kirk and Spock and etc. They're not eating real meat in the future. They eat kind of replicated stuff, and of course Spock is very famously a vegetarian, and so this kind of seeing the current state of humanity was everything about Star Trek. This kind of idea that we're using nuclear weaponry and it's silly because it's dangerous and stuff like that. And then also that there's very graphic footage in this film of us slaughtering whales. They don't shy away from that, and I think that was very, very important, particularly to Leonard Nimoy, to not shy away from that and say, well, look, this is exactly what we do. This is what we've been doing for many, many years. We need to wake up to ourselves. And, everyone likes to talk about Star Trek 4 being the funny one and stuff like that. And there's certainly humor in it. And it's certainly some of the greatest humorous timing in any of the films, and certainly probably the series. But I think overall, the importance of Star Trek 4 as even a subconscious level of prepping people for the messages that were to come. Like, we're certainly much more aware of environmental messages now, and there's been a lot more kind of films have probably touched on that a lot more. But this, to me, Star Trek 4 is one of the very first films that stood right up, put its hand up and said, no, this is an environmental thing we're going to talk about. We're not just going to do an allegory. We're not going to do anything like that. This is actual. The future of your species depends on this. And it's just, it's a wonderful film, of course.
All right, well, let's jump back to the beginning. We skipped over this one as well.
We did.
The motion picture, where it all got started. I think that they were trying a little too hard to be 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Yeah. The thing I like about Star Trek, the motion picture, I really, really like the director's cut. And I would anyone who's got a massive issue with Star Trek, the motion picture, I would suggest watch the director's cut, because I think it just rounds it off a little bit nicer, although there are some slight changes that I'm kind of like, oh, that's a shame. I kind of liked kind of what they did originally, type of thing. What I like about Star Trek the motion picture is it's grand. There's nothing small about it. And I kind of feel that was a really important element to bringing Star Trek to the big screen and really set them up. Like, the whole sequence of watching the Enterprise for the first time on the big screen in high definition and all that type of stuff. It's a beautiful sequence. It's an absolutely beautiful sequence. I'm not a massive, obviously, the uniforms, there are some uniforms I actually really like, and I really like some of the ideas. And also, I think you need to look at the time period when it was kind of created, and those pastel kind of muted colors were very, very big at that time for sci-fi. So I don't think they were unusual at the time. But also the bright reds and bright blues and even the bright yellow greens just would have really, really just jumped out of the screen and really kind of taken your eye. I'm not sure they were equipped in 1977 or whatever to shoot those type of colors without them just completely blowing everything on the screen out of the water visually. So I do kind of understand that kind of whole approach. And then, of course, when we get to Star Trek 2 and even the reds in the maroon, there's a very good reason why it's not bright red. It's maroon, and it's a muted maroon. You couldn't have the colors of the original series kind of there at that time. The concept of Star Trek, the motion picture, when you kind of break down the storyline too, is very Star Trek. It's very much a Star Trek episode. This idea of the Voyager 6 being discovered by robots or artificial intelligence or the Borg, and being retrofitted to fill out its mission, and defining that mission the way it does, and then becoming sentient, and then kind of stomping its feet at the doorstep of Earth. It's very Star Trek. The only probably complaint I have about the film is there's probably a little bit too much orifice talk. about midway. Yeah, I probably would have just used a different term than orifice. And continuously using the word orifice and having Kirk, I just wanted to see the scene on the Enterprise with Kirk's going, okay, enough with the orifice talk, Spock. I know that's what it is, but enough with the orifice.
It's an odd.
Yeah. Let's just talk about like it's the portal or something, man. Whatever. It doesn't. It just the hole will be fine.
Let's find a synonym.
That's why he gave up his VJ. That's why he gave up his Kolinar, because it wasn't the fact that he just sensed VJ. He also sensed a really good joke. A really good opportunity to talk about orifices on the Enterprise bridge. And he's like, you know what? Kolinar would not allow me to make that joke and make. So I really got to give it up because I've really got to go drop that bomb.
I think the biggest problem that I have with the motion picture is probably the pacing,
which I think the director's cut fixes though. I think that fixes a little bit. It's about the same length, but I think it's re-edited to a point where it's like something's happening at least. Like I do, don't worry. I do take the point. Like I don't know. It's hard because like it's the wormhole scene. You could probably drop that.
Yeah.
But then we wouldn't have Chekhov going photon torpedoes away. We wouldn't have that, which is a shame.
Or that classic effect.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's but that's what I'm saying about Star Trek: The Motion Picture. It's like you go, okay, well, what are you going to take away? Like which part do you want to lose? And it's like, do you want to lose the giant meeting that they have on the Enterprise where he tells everyone, yeah, we're screwed because this is the thing we're going to go fight, and everyone's like, ooh, dang, it's too good a scene. Do you get rid of the scene where the transporter messes up and it kills the Vulcan guy? These are all iconic sequences, and so it's very little. There is a lot of staring at the screen, but in saying that too, I don't know about you, but me as a kid, that was very much a whole I'm there with them kind of thing. You're watching, it gives you ample footage to pretend you're on the bridge of the Enterprise watching this unfold as they see it. And the other thing is Ensign Jobsworth is brought to everyone's attention, who I feel is a huge disappointment that didn't go on to be in the other films, and I'm sure there were plans, I'm sure, but they probably couldn't get the actor because I think they did one other job. I'm talking about the gentleman with the weirdly shaped head, who says, "Oh, but Captain Decker, he's been with the ship so long," and has to get bitch slapped by Uhura. I just feel that he added a bit of clerical. Yeah. He added a clerical addition to it, where it's like, he's probably the dude who goes, I don't feel out the form.
I don't want to.
Spock kind of rocks up to the ship in his cool gear. He rocks up to his cool gear and stuff, and then like Kirk's like, oh well, we'll make him the science officer, and then he's like, Order of Merit. All right, and advertised it on the Job Network.
From the beginning of the series of films to the end, the Undiscovered Country, probably the biggest Trek installment for canon-related purposes. There's so much meat in that episode. Worf is there. It's just all of this, creating all of this. The Khitomer Accords that are so rife throughout the Next Generation, at a time when the Next Generation is on the air, retconning. Believe it or not, it was happening in the early 90s.
It's Star Trek 6 is this kind of another wonderful example of Star Trek, and why when Star Trek works really well, it works very, really well. This whole kind of, it was, Russia and the fall of communism and all that type of stuff. And I think they handle that extraordinarily well. When you kind of saying that on paper, you go, oh, I don't know if that's going to be that interesting. And of course, they make it really, really interesting, and also gave a lot of people who wanted to be involved with Star Trek a chance to be involved with Star Trek. You've got Christian Slater on the Excelsior. You've got Iman, who is married to David Bowie, who plays the shapeshifter. You also, of course, have Christopher Plummer, who is just exceptional as General Chang.
Some big name Klingons,
Yeah.
really, in the films.
Yeah, definitely, and that's kind of neat, and I think what they kind of do with all that is really, really is all great. Probably, and also one of the best Enterprise fight sequences with the Klingon bird of prey that can cloak. Firewire, she's cloaked. Watching, there's one particular explosion point where it goes through the hole, and that's just exceptionally good. And you've got these wonderful little moments between all the different characters where, Spock and McCoy are working on a torpedo, and they get to do their their whole thing where it's roles reversed kind of thing, and that's really awesome. Everyone gets little moments here and there. You got Chekhov doing a whole whodunit. Yeah, Sulu's a captain. Uhura probably got the shortest end of the stick with this kind of concept that she doesn't know Klingon and she has to use a giant old book, and she's not really very good at her job. No, it was poorly executed and it wasn't believable. And it is actually probably the one scene in the whole film that really stands out to me that shouldn't
just
be
to make
there.
A joke.
Yeah, just to make a joke. And even Uhura dancing naked in the desert was a better scene than that.
Yes. How can we forget that?
Well, yeah, I mean, this is the thing. It's like, this is how ridiculous that is. Whereas I really, really... So I'll accept that. I accept that a senior officer had a conversation with a commanding officer about getting naked and doing a fan dance in the middle of the desert for some aliens over Uhura having to read a Klingon textbook and not being able to speak Klingon.
Yeah.
But, I completely... It's one of those scenes that just irritates me. And, of course, we have Kim Cattrall, who was reasonably famous at that stage. She'd been in a lot of films, a lot of big films, and of course she would go on to be in Sex and the City, which was probably her massive kind of role. One of her lines, and I wonder if you know it. It's the when Kirk's ordering her to take them out of space dock, and she says, you can only use thrusters whilst in space dock or something, but she butchers the line completely and puts the wrong emphasis on only while in space dock. So she's like saying, you can only use the thrusters in space dock, as far as you can't use thrusters anywhere else.
Yes.
And it's like, no, that should have been caught because it's actually delivered really, really. She just was given bad direction, which is so odd.
Yeah.
But I think that's the style of Myers, is that he's a little bit more, he's less concerned with some of that stuff and more concerned about other stuff.
The big picture.
Yeah, like things like he'd probably be more concerned about a particular sign up on the back of the thing than getting that right. I think
Inflections on dialogue and stuff.
Yeah,
like that.
yeah, exactly. Like he's more interested in some of the there's serial numbers on the phasers and there's a galley and then there's that whole kind of meal sequence and stuff. These are the type of things that he's kind of looking at.
Yeah.
And I think that he doesn't get himself bogged down in technobabble.
Yeah, true. Well, Lee, we are so close to the end of the year, but we're so close to wrapping up our discussion on all aspects of Trek. We've been going all year on this, and we're in the home stretch now. Coming up on the next episode, we've got TNG movies and then the JJ movies. Of course, find Lee Sargent on Twitter at Lee Sargent. Hit him up too with his drawings, and also hit him up and tell him what you think of some of his opinions, because they're interesting.
Because I always enjoy that.
There's nothing we like more than honest Twitter trolls, isn't that right?
Yeah, that's right. There's nothing I love more than just being told that my opinion is not valid.
Well, never not valid, but it's completely wrong. And of course, you can find me at MirrorMatt86 and at Trekzone.org as well on the Twitter. Lee, let's do it again on the next episode with TNG movies.
Make it so.
Oh,
you see what I did there?
Yeah.
What a bridge.
Yeah. Oh.